can, but
I now recognize the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator McCarthy, from the EPA, your agency wrote that EPA projections show that the vast majority of the U.S. counties would meet the proposed standards by 2025, just with the rules and programs now in place or underway. Is that correct?
that is correct.
Then is it also correct that the EPA is just now, or just earlier this year, started releasing guidelines for implementing the 2008 rule?
That is actually true, sir, yes.
Then why in the world are we talking about a new standard which the EPA, based on a past hearing here, admitted the technology doesn't exist to meet this new standard? Why are you implementing a new standard when you haven't even implemented the last one?
Well, sir, there are still remaining a number of standards on, and this is actually an effort.
Ma'am, I don't want to get in.
Well, Congress told us to do this, sir. It is an effort to continue to look at the science.
So if Congress, you're doing it because Congress told you to do it?
Well,
that's a yes or no. Are you doing it because Congress instructed you to do it?
But for more reasons than that.
Well,
yes, that is
my
my obligation.
Your authorization for this is from Congress. Is that correct?
It is, and I've actually been told by the courts to do this.
If Congress told you not to do it, you wouldn't do it.
I did not say that.
No,
I told you that I'm operating under the authority and the laws that you gave me to implement.
To do it.
I'm implementing your laws.
Okay, so if we change the law, you won't do it. Thank you. I would like to talk about the impact on low-income families. I grew up dirt poor, so I get this. I'd just like to point out, and you're probably aware of it, but I imagine most people aren't, that the National Black Chamber of Commerce has come out strongly against this. Let me read you what they said. The EPA regulations, and if they will put up slide number 1, please. They say that the EPA regulations will increase Hispanic poverty by more than 26% and black poverty by more than 23%. This first slide shows the increases in energy burdens on black and Hispanic households who are disproportionately low income. If you put up the next one, this shows losses in median household incomes. Again, disproportionately impacting black and Hispanic households. Put up the next slide, please. This shows the projected job losses. Okay? For black families, by 2025, we're talking 2.2 million job losses. By 2035, 7 million. Among Hispanics, 3.8 million by 2025. By 2035, we're talking 12 million. If you put up the next slide, this shows the increase in the poverty rate for black households and Hispanic households. And again, reading from the National Black Chamber of Commerce report, the EPA regulations will increase Hispanic poverty by more than 26% and black poverty by more than 23%. Ma'am, I don't know how you justify this, because it does create an enormous economic burden. It's having an enormous impact on jobs. The Economic Policy Institute, which is a left-leaning group, they basically are labor's think tank, points out that 29% of the unemployed, the current unemployed, have been out of work for 27 weeks or more. Ma'am, that's over 6 months. We're looking at a report from Gallup that shows that prior to 2008, there were approximately 100,000 more businesses starting up than closing. Since 2008, we're now seeing 70,000 more businesses close than start up. And the United States now, in terms of how we rank with other industrialized nations, in terms of entrepreneurship, job creation, we don't rank first, second, third. We rank 12th. And I want to quote from an article from USA Today that, in trying to explain these two, in their words, terrifying trends, the death of so many businesses and the dearth of new ones, says there are numerous factors, but one of the most obvious is America's ever-growing regulatory state. And I've sat here now since we started this hearing, listening to you basically deny that there's an economic impact. You've even asserted that there's going to be an economic benefit. We've had numerous hearings on the ozone rule, on the Clean Power Plan, and there's been several people testified that this is all justified for health benefit. But here's a study, and Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit all of these for the record, if I may.
Without objection, so ordered.
Here's an article in the American Journal of Public Health that makes the point that the single biggest predictor of in terms of respiratory health is income. And obviously, I think you would agree, wouldn't you, that income is directly related to job status. Would you agree with that?
It sounds right.
Thank you, Madam. Mr. Chairman, I yield the balance of my time.
At this time, the chair recognizes Mr. Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator McCarthy, I think you made a point that cost was not a major consideration at one point in your testimony. Do you not think that considering the link between income and health, that cost and the number of jobs that we lost and the preponderance of evidence that we're losing jobs in companies because of overregulation, do you not think that we should take into consideration cost? Would you? Thank you.
I believe that jobs and the economy are tremendously important and need to be considered. I want to just make sure we understand each other. I said in the development of an ozone standard, the law, and it's been told to us by the courts, precludes us from looking at cost. It's a health-based standard. That does not mean we do not look at cost in the implementation phase.
I realize that in the recent Supreme Court decision involving the mercury rule, that those are different statutes, but at the same time, though, I think the point made in the Supreme Court decision that it's unreasonable to apply regulations without taking into consideration the cost and the economic impact should be relevant to the discussion we're having about ozone, about the Clean Power Plan, about the waters of the U.S. And I would really encourage the EPA to be more conscientious in that regard, and particularly in the context of how it impacts low-income families. I got a little animated earlier. I was out of time. I'm happy to have the second round of questions to make that connection, but and it's particularly important in the context of how it impacts minorities. And I talked about the report from the Black Chamber of Commerce, the National Black Chamber of Commerce, but also the Southern Christian Leadership Council, which I believe was founded by Martin Luther King, or he co-founded it. Their president testified to the same effect, that what the EPA is doing is going to have a disproportionate impact on black and Hispanic families. And I would say across the board, all low-income families are going to suffer tremendous harm from these regulations. And what bothers me about this more than anything else is the reluctance of the EPA to hand over the scientific research for peer review. The reports that I've entered into the record have been peer reviewed. Okay, I think that we need total transparency here. You know, we're talking. You talk about what you want to do in the context of a cleaner environment. You made this point that the GDP has gone up since the Clean Air Act, 1970. More specifically, since 1980, GDP's gone up 467%. Vehicle miles traveled, which vehicle emissions contribute to ozone, have gone up 94%. Population's increased by 38%. Energy output's gone up 22%, but emissions have gone down 50%. I made this point in a previous hearing that the air is demonstrably cleaner than it's been in 50 or 60 years, yet we continue to see an increase in respiratory illnesses, particularly asthma. So my point to you is that this is a bridge too far. I think the EPA needs to scale this back. I think you need to first allow the states to implement the 2008 standards. They were already in the process. They were waiting on input from the EPA for their state implementation plans. So I think this is clearly a bridge too far. I'm very concerned about the collaboration that the EPA has. I think the over-involvement of outside groups, because it appears to be agenda-driven and not sound public policy. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield the balance of my time.